The Autobiography of Benjamin Franklin, by Benjamin Franklin. Introduction. Imagine for a moment a 17-year-old boy, a runaway, walking the streets of a city where he knows no one. He's dirty from his long journey, his pockets are stuffed with a few extra shirts and stockings, and his entire life savings consists of a single Dutch dollar and some copper coins. He's hungry, so he walks into a baker's shop and, not knowing the local currency or customs, asks for 3 penny worth of bread. The baker hands him 3 enormous, puffy rolls. He's surprised by the sheer quantity of it, and with no room in his pockets, he tucks 1 roll under each arm and begins eating the third as he walks down the main street, looking utterly ridiculous. A young woman, standing at her doorway, sees this awkward boy and can't help but laugh at the comical sight. She has no idea that this strange, hungry young man would not only become her future husband, but also one of the most famous, influential, and beloved figures in the world. That boy was Benjamin Franklin. And the book we're exploring today isn't just his story, it's one of the most remarkable blueprints for self-creation ever written. This isn't just a history book. It's a manual on how to build a life from scratch. How do you go from being the youngest son of a candlemaker, with just 2 years of formal schooling, to becoming a brilliant writer, a world-renowned scientist, a clever inventor, a masterful diplomat, and one of the founding fathers of a nation? The answer is in these pages. Franklin didn't just live his life, he designed it. He approached self-improvement with the same curiosity and rigor that he applied to his scientific experiments. He believed that character wasn't something you were born with, but something you could build, piece by piece, through daily practice. By the end of our journey today, you'll have the core principles that guided him, the simple, yet profound system he created to master his habits, his finances, his relationships, and his mind. This isn't about becoming a historical figure. It's about understanding that the same tools Franklin used to shape his destiny are available to you, right now. It is the ultimate story of how ordinary beginnings can lead to an extraordinary life. So, let's begin. Book summary. The story of Benjamin Franklin begins not with a grand destiny, but in a crowded house on Milk Street in Boston, in the year 1706. He was the 15th of 17 children, and the youngest of all the sons. His father, Josiah, was a candlemaker and soap boiler, a humble, hard-working trade. With so many mouths to feed, there wasn't much money for extensive schooling. Young Ben was a voracious reader from an age he couldn't even remember, and his father initially thought of dedicating him to the church. But a college education was far too expensive for their large family, and so, Ben's formal schooling ended when he was just 10 years old. At 12, he was apprenticed to his older brother James, who was a printer. This, in many ways, was his true university. Being in a printing house gave him access to something he craved more than anything: books. He would borrow books from apprentices at the local bookshops, often staying up all night to read them so he could return them clean and unnoticed in the morning. He devoured everything he could get his hands on, from John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress to Plutarch's Lives of the Noble Grecians and Romans, which he said he read abundantly. But it was one particular book that changed everything. He came across an odd volume of The Spectator, a popular English publication filled with witty and elegant essays. He was captivated by the quality of the writing and became determined to master it himself. And the way he did it is a powerful lesson in deliberate practice. He would read an essay, jot down short hints of the meaning of each sentence, and then set it aside for a few days. Then, he would try to rewrite the essay in his own words, aiming to be as clear and elegant as the original. Afterwards, he would compare his version to the original, see his mistakes, and correct them. He even turned the essays into poetry and then back into prose, just to expand his vocabulary and command of the language. Think about that for a moment. This wasn't a school assignment. No one was forcing him to do this. It was a young teenager, working a full-time job, who had the discipline and foresight to create his own curriculum for self-improvement. He was building his most powerful tool, the ability to communicate, to persuade, and to think clearly on paper. His relationship with his brother James, however, was strained. James treated him not as a brother, but as a mere apprentice, and was often harsh and even violent. Young Ben, wanting to prove his own worth, secretly wrote an anonymous article and slipped it under the print shop door at night. He had the immense pleasure of hearing his brother and his intellectual friends read the piece, praise it, and wonder which prominent local figure had written it. He kept up the secret, submitting several more essays that were all well received. But when he finally revealed himself as the author, his brother's pride was wounded, and their relationship only worsened. At 17, Franklin could take it no more. He decided to run away. Knowing his father would side with his brother and prevent him from leaving, he secretly sold some of his books and, with the help of a friend, boarded a ship to New York. He arrived a few days later, a boy of 17, with very little money and no connections. Finding no work there, he was advised to try Philadelphia, another 100 miles away. And so began the arduous journey that led to that memorable entrance into the city, with the 3 puffy rolls. He arrived tired, hungry, and alone, in a city where he knew no one. Yet, he wasn't adrift for long. He had a trade. He presented himself to the local printers, Andrew Bradford and Samuel Keimer. Keimer, though an eccentric and not a particularly skilled printer, gave him a job. It was here in Philadelphia that Franklin's true character began to shine. He wasn't just a worker, he was a problem solver. Keimer's printing press was old and broken, and he had only one set of worn-out type. Franklin, resourceful as ever, got the press working, and when they were short on certain letters, he figured out how to cast new ones himself. He made the ink. He was, in his own words, a factotum, a person who does everything. His work ethic was relentless, but he knew that skill and hard work alone weren't enough. He understood the importance of community and connection. In 1727, he gathered a group of his most ingenious acquaintances, clerks, surveyors, and other tradesmen who loved to read and discuss ideas, and formed a club called the Junto. It was a club for mutual improvement. They met every Friday evening to discuss queries on morals, politics, or natural philosophy. Each member had to write an essay every 3 months. The rules of the Junto were designed for sincere inquiry, not for ego. To prevent arguments, all expressions of absolute certainty or direct contradiction were banned, and members had to pay small fines for breaking these rules. The Junto wasn't just a debate club, it was a network of friends helping each other succeed. It became Franklin's personal board of directors and the launchpad for many of his public projects. One of the first of these projects was born from the club's love of books. The members would often bring their own books to meetings to reference in their discussions. This gave Franklin an idea. What if they pooled their books into a common library, for all members to use? The idea was a success, but Franklin soon envisioned something grander. He proposed a public subscription library, the first of its kind in America. He drew up the plans and, using the help of his friends in the Junto, he gathered 50 subscribers who each paid 40 shillings to start, and 10 shillings a year to maintain it. This was the mother of all American subscription libraries. It transformed Philadelphia by making knowledge accessible not just to the clergy or the wealthy, but to ordinary tradesmen and farmers. As his reputation grew, he eventually broke away from Keimer and, with a partner named Hugh Meredith, started his own printing house. Franklin's shop was different. It was a hub of industry and reliability. He tells a wonderful story about this period. A new printing office was a risky venture, and many of the city's established merchants expected it to fail. But one influential doctor spoke up in his favor. He said, "For the industry of that, Franklin is superior to anything I ever saw of the kind. I see him still at work when I go home from club, and he is at work again before his neighbors are out of bed." This visible diligence gave them character and credit. Franklin understood perception. He didn't just want to be industrious, he wanted to be seen as industrious. He dressed plainly. He was never seen at idle diversions like fishing or shooting. To show that he was not above his business, he would sometimes push the paper he bought from the stores home through the streets on a wheelbarrow. This performance of humility and hard work built a powerful reputation. People wanted to do business with the thriving young man who was so clearly dedicated to his craft. Soon, he bought out his partner and became the sole owner. He started a newspaper, the Pennsylvania Gazette, which he made lively and engaging. He also began publishing Poor Richard's Almanac. Almanacs were one of the most widely read publications in the colonies, and Franklin saw an opportunity. He filled the little spaces between the calendar days with witty, memorable proverbs that championed virtues like frugality, diligence, and prudence. Sayings like "a penny saved is a penny earned," or "early to bed, early to rise, makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise." Through Poor Richard, he became the moral instructor for a generation of Americans, shaping the very character of the new nation. It was around this time that he corrected one of the great errata, or errors, of his life. He reconnected with Deborah Reed, the young woman who had laughed at him on his first day in Philadelphia. She had been married in his absence to another man who had since abandoned her and fled the province in debt. Despite the complicated situation, their old affection was rekindled, and in 1730, they were married. She proved to be a wonderful partner, helping him in the shop, folding and stitching pamphlets, and living as frugally as he did. Franklin's story so far is one of incredible outward success. But the most fascinating part of his autobiography is the look he gives us into his inner world, his ambitious and methodical project for achieving moral perfection. He writes, "I wish to live without committing any fault at any time. I would conquer all that either natural inclination, custom, or company might lead me into." It was a bold, almost audacious goal. But he didn't just wish for it, he engineered a system to achieve it. First, he identified 13 virtues that he felt were necessary or desirable. They were: 1. Temperance, eat not to dullness, drink not to elevation. 2. Silence, speak not but what may benefit others or yourself, avoid trifling conversation. 3. Order, let all your things have their places, let each part of your business have its time. 4. Resolution, resolve to perform what you ought, perform without fail what you resolve. 5. Frugality, make no expense but to do good to others or yourself, i.e., waste nothing. 6. Industry, lose no time, be always employed in something useful, cut off all unnecessary actions. 7. Sincerity, use no hurtful deceit, think innocently and justly, and if you speak, speak accordingly. 8. Justice, wrong none by doing injuries, or omitting the benefits that are your duty. 9. Moderation, avoid extremes, forbear resenting injuries so much as you think they deserve. 10. Cleanliness, tolerate no uncleanliness in body, clothes, or habitation. 11. Tranquility, be not disturbed at trifles, or at accidents common or unavoidable. 12. Chastity, rarely use venery but for health or offspring. 13. Humility, imitate Jesus and Socrates. He knew that trying to master all 13 at once would be impossible. So he decided to focus on just one virtue per week. He created a little book, with a page for each virtue. Each page was ruled with 7 columns for the days of the week, and 13 rows for the virtues. Every evening, he would review his day and mark with a black spot any fault he committed against that day's virtue. In the first week, he would focus all his attention on temperance, trying to keep that line clear of spots, while just noting his failures in the other areas. The next week, he would focus on silence, while continuing to practice temperance. He would proceed this way through all 13 virtues, a full course taking 13 weeks. He hoped that by focusing his energy, he could build one good habit on top of another until they became second nature. He found the project much harder than he had imagined. He was surprised to find himself, in his own words, so much fuller of faults than I had imagined. The virtue of order gave him the most trouble. He was not naturally neat, and his good memory meant he didn't always feel the inconvenience of being disorganized. He struggled so much with it that he was almost ready to give up. And here, he tells a wonderful and deeply human story. He compares himself to a man who wanted to buy an axe from a smith and asked to have the whole surface as bright as the edge. The smith agreed, but only if the man would turn the grinding wheel. The man turned and turned, but the work was exhausting. He kept checking his progress and was tempted to just take the axe as it was, with some dark spots still on it. The smith said, turn on, we shall have it bright by and by. As yet, it is only speckled." But the man replied, "Yes, but I think I like a speckled axe best." This is the key to Franklin's whole philosophy of self-improvement. He realized that perfection was unattainable. He never achieved his goal of a perfectly clean book. But he concluded that he was, by the endeavor, a better and a happier man than I otherwise should have been if I had not attempted it. He learned to be content with a speckled axe. The value wasn't in arriving at perfection, but in the process of striving for it. This humility was, ironically, the last virtue he added to his list. A Quaker friend kindly told him that he was often seen as proud and overbearing in conversation. So, Franklin added humility, and made it a rule to forbear direct contradiction and to never use words that implied a fixed opinion, like certainly or undoubtedly. Instead, he would say, "I conceive," or "it appears to me at present." He found that this modest way of proposing his ideas made people more receptive. He had fewer arguments, and he found it easier to persuade others to his point of view. As his wealth and influence grew, he turned more of his attention to public affairs. His approach was always the same: identify a problem, propose a practical solution, and mobilize a network of people to make it happen. When he noticed the city watch was inefficient and corrupt, he proposed a professional, tax-funded system. He wrote a paper on how to prevent house fires, which led to the creation of the Union Fire Company, the first in Philadelphia. He helped found a hospital for the poor, cleverly drafting the funding bill so the government would match the private donations, which motivated everyone to give more. He drew up a proposal for an academy, which would eventually become the University of Pennsylvania. In every case, he practiced the humility he preached. He would present his ideas not as his own, but as a scheme of a number of friends. He found that by making himself smaller, the projects became bigger and more successful. His scientific curiosity also flourished. After seeing some simple electrical experiments in Boston, he became fascinated with the subject. His house was constantly full of people who came to see these new wonders. Through his famous kite experiment, he proved that lightning was a form of electricity, a discovery that made him famous across Europe. This led to his invention of the lightning rod, a practical device that saved countless homes from fire. He was elected to the Royal Society in London, England's most prestigious scientific body. As the colony's relationship with Great Britain grew more tense, Franklin was increasingly called upon to serve as a statesman. He was a member of the Pennsylvania Assembly for years, where he consistently fought against the proprietors, the Penn family who owned the colony, who wanted their vast estates to be exempt from taxes. His stubborn defense of the people's rights eventually led the Assembly to send him to England in 1757 to plead their case directly to the Crown. The autobiography ends here, just as he is embarking on this crucial journey. He was 51 years old. He had already lived a life more full and accomplished than a dozen ordinary men. But in many ways, his most famous chapter, as a diplomat and a founding father who would help draft the Declaration of Independence and secure France's aid in the Revolutionary War, was just beginning. The book, as he wrote it, was a letter to his son, an attempt to pass down the lessons he had learned. He writes that he emerged from poverty and obscurity to a state of affluence and some degree of reputation in the world, and that his descendants might like to know the conducing means he used, as they might find some of them fit to be imitated. And that is the enduring magic of this book. It is a story, yes, but it is also a generous gift. It's the story of a man who, through relentless self-discipline, a deep love of learning, and a profound commitment to serving others, literally invented himself. He shows us that the circumstances of our birth do not have to be the architects of our future. We can be the architects. We can choose our virtues, we can build our skills, we can design our lives. And though we may never achieve perfection, we can all settle for a speckled axe, and be better and happier for the effort. Commentary. When you close the final page of Benjamin Franklin's autobiography, you're left with a powerful and deeply optimistic feeling. It's the feeling that improvement is possible. Not just possible, but a natural, achievable, and even enjoyable part of life. In a world that often tells us we are limited by our circumstances, Franklin's story is a resounding declaration that the greatest power we have is the power to shape ourselves. What strikes me most about his approach is how practical and human it is. His famous project for moral perfection could easily sound arrogant or naive. But the way he describes it is filled with humility and humor. He doesn't present himself as a saint, he shows us his struggles. His battle with the virtue of order is so relatable. Who among us hasn't made a grand plan to get organized, only to find our messy habits creeping back in? But his conclusion, to embrace the speckled axe, is a profound lesson in self-compassion. He teaches us that the goal isn't to become flawless, but to become a little better than we were yesterday. The effort, not the outcome, is where the growth and happiness lie. This book is also a masterclass in the power of small, consistent actions. Franklin didn't become a great writer overnight. He did it by rewriting one essay at a time. He didn't build a library with a giant grant. He did it by gathering 50 friends to contribute a small sum. He didn't reform Philadelphia with a single grand decree. He did it by solving one problem at a time: the fire company, the street sweeping, the city watch. His life is the ultimate proof that small habits, compounded over time, lead to extraordinary results. And perhaps the most enduring lesson is his definition of a successful life. For Franklin, success was not just about personal wealth or fame, though he achieved both. It was about being useful. He invented the Franklin stove to warm rooms more efficiently and save fuel. He invented bifocals. He created the lightning rod. He refused to patent these inventions, believing that since we enjoy great advantages from the inventions of others, we should be glad of an opportunity to serve others by any invention of ours, and this we should do freely and generously. His greatest satisfaction came from projects that benefited his community, his beloved Philadelphia. So, how can we apply his wisdom today? Here are a few simple actions inspired by his life. First, become the architect of your own education. Just like Franklin, who turned a print shop into his university, see the world as your classroom. Read books on subjects that spark your curiosity. Don't just consume information, engage with it. Try his method: read something interesting, put it down, and then try to explain it in your own words. This simple act turns passive learning into active knowledge. Second, pick one virtue to work on. Don't try to change your whole life at once. What is one small habit that, if you mastered it, would make a real difference? Maybe it's temperance in the form of less screen time. Maybe it's order in the form of making your bed every morning. Or maybe it's silence, learning to listen more than you speak. Pick one, focus on it for a week, and just observe. Don't aim for perfection. Aim for a speckled axe. Third, start your own junto. You don't need a formal club. Just gather one or two friends who also want to grow. Talk about big ideas. Share what you're learning. Hold each other accountable. As Franklin discovered, improvement is easier when you're not doing it alone. The simple act of discussing your goals with others makes them more real and achievable. That was a summary of the Autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. We've journeyed through the blueprint of a remarkable life today, but a summary is like looking at a map. Reading the book is taking the journey for yourself. The real magic isn't just in knowing what Franklin did, but in experiencing his voice, his wit, and his profound wisdom firsthand. It's in those quiet moments when a particular story or a simple phrase resonates with the challenge you're facing right now. This summary is your guide to decide if this journey is one you want to take. If anything we've talked about today has sparked a fire in you, I encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just learning about history, it's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see yourself and the life you are capable of building. Also, if you found this exploration valuable, I'd be grateful if you'd hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next journey into another life-changing book from the world's most successful minds. Let's keep learning and growing together.